Our first reading today is from Isaiah chapter 65, verses 17 to 25. For I am about to create new heavens and a new earth. The former things shall not be remembered or come to mind. But be glad and rejoice forever in what I am creating. For I am about to create Jerusalem as a joy and its people as a delight. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and delight in my people. No more shall the sound of weeping be heard in it, or the cry of distress. No more shall there be in it an infant that lives but a few days, or an old person who does not live out a lifetime. For one who dies at 100 years will be considered a youth, and one who falls short of 100 will be considered accursed. They shall build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They shall not build and another inhabit. They shall not plant and another eat. For like the days of a tree shall the days of my people be, and my chosen shall long enjoy the work of their hands. They shall not labour in vain, or bear children for calamity, for they shall be the offspring blessed by the Lord, and their descendants as well. Before they call, I will answer. While they are yet speaking, I will hear. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together. The lion shall eat straw like an ox, but the serpent, its food shall be dust. They shall not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain, says the Lord. In the film Titanic, there are scenes near the beginning where everyone is on the wharf just before boarding the Titanic. And all the claims are made about how strong and beautiful and unsinkable the Titanic is. Now, let us hear the Luke reading from chapter 21, verses 5 to 19. When some were speaking about the temple, how it was adorned with beautiful stones and gifts dedicated to God, he said, "As for these things that you see, the days will come when not one stone will be left upon another. All will be thrown down." They asked him, "Teacher, when will this be? And what will be the sign that this is about to take place?" And he said, "Beware that you are not led astray, for many will come in my name and say, 'I am he,' and 'the time is near.' Do not go after them. When you hear of wars and insurrections, do not be terrified, for these things must take place first, but the end will not follow immediately." Then he said to them, "Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes and in various places famines and plagues, and there will be dreadful portents and great signs from heaven. But before all this occurs, they will arrest you and persecute you. They will hand you over to synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors because of my name. This will give you an opportunity to testify. So, make up your minds not to prepare your defence in advance, for I will give you words and a wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to withstand or contradict. You will be betrayed, even by parents and brothers, by relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death. You will be hated by all because of my name, but not a hair of your head will perish. By your endurance, you will gain your souls.
What was the picture of Jesus that you saw in that last passage? Is this the Jesus that you see? A loving and laughing Jesus? This is the cover of a catalogue of paintings from people all around the world who depicted Jesus as someone who was loving and laughing. An introduction goes like this. About 2,000 years ago, Jesus, a man of Jewish descent, burst onto the Middle East scene. Without the help of an army, mass media, spin doctors, or the approval of religious or secular authorities, he sowed ideas that would change the world. His revolutionary message was that love should be the basis for all aspects of our living. Our love was to be all-encompassing, not just for our friends and community, but to include our enemies. Jesus undoubtedly had great charisma, but lived a simple life, mixing with ordinary people, sharing their joys and sorrows. However, much Christian art and theology has concentrated on guilt and suffering. But Jesus came to bring joy to the world, not to make guilt-ridden wrecks. This collection of paintings from artists from 18 countries give their impressions of a loving, laughing Jesus who is a living presence. In the last 2,000 years, no one has changed the world as much as Jesus, and he did so without PR consultants, mass media, political party, or a big bank account. Luke's Gospel, the Gospel we have been reading through this year, the year of C in our lectionary readings. Luke's Gospel emphasises Jesus' love and care for those whom the Jewish leaders never even noticed. Margaret and Chris have been part of the team putting the service together for today, and I've invited them to reflect on various passages from Luke. They had quite a long list, so they've done quite a good deal of homework for today.
Thanks, David. Yes, Luke features strongly throughout the year and in this service of worship, and his writing in particular. And thinking about what we've heard this morning and other parts of Luke's Gospel, such as the Beatitudes, the parable of the rich fool, the Good Samaritan, the rich man and Lazarus, for example, there's a theme that comes through for me. Jesus' teaching turns the conventional wisdom on its head. The conventional wisdom about who is worthy in society and who is not. The outcasts of society are not deserving of the scorn and humiliation that's often heaped on them. The rich and powerful don't always deserve adulation. Jesus speaks in defence of the underdog. He embraces the unlovable. Those who felt they had a divine right to rule were so entrenched in their thinking and the benefits of their position that they just did not accept what Jesus was on about. But in the face of this negativity and hostility from the powers of the day, Jesus remained strong, resolute, and serene.
I was particularly struck from the long list of readings that David suggested that we should reflect on. I was particularly struck at this time with the Beatitudes, and during the week I spent probably too much time looking at my Facebook feed, and one of the things that one of my friends had posted was some new Beatitudes that Pope Francis has suggested. And I found them particularly relevant to the other stories in Luke, the ones that Chris and David have referred to. And I thought I'd bring them to you today and just say a little about how they struck me, because they certainly delivered some challenges. So I'm going to alternate between Pope Francis's words and my own reflections, and I hope you can tell the difference. I'll try and do the inverted comma bit. Okay. So, blessed are those who remain faithful while enduring evils inflicted on them by others and forgive them from their heart. Blessed are those who look into the eyes of the abandoned and marginalised and show them their closeness. That really struck me. The abandoned, such as asylum seekers being rejected by country after country, and marginalised, as represented perhaps this week by those suffering the effects of globalisation and seeking redress in the promises of demagogues. Back to Pope Francis. Blessed are those who see God in every person and strive to make others also discover God. I know I'm not good at that kind of inclusiveness, which asks me to see God in people whose actions seem to me to be wholly selfish and destructive. Reminding me of the story in Luke, which we don't focus on much, a story in Luke where a Samaritan village didn't want to give hospitality to Jesus and his crew because they were on their journey to Jerusalem. And because they were going to Jerusalem, the Samaritan village didn't want to receive them. And Jesus' disciples asked Jesus, "Shall we call down fire from heaven upon them?" And Jesus said, No. Prevented his disciples from taking vengeful action against them. And that spoke to me this week too. Back to the Pope. Blessed are those who protect and care for our common home. Blessed are those who renounce their own comfort in order to help others. Blessed are those who pray and work for full communion between Christians. I'd want to take that one a bit further. I'd want to take that to all those of goodwill seeking to live life in the way Jesus points us to, in the spirit of Luke's stories embodying real inclusion in God's commonwealth of the Gentiles, as well as the tax collectors and other hated categories of people. And this little passage from the Pope ends, all these are messengers of God's mercy and tenderness. And that struck me.
The loving and laughing Jesus was a tecton. Let me say that again. The loving and laughing Jesus was a tecton. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a Greek word. We get the word technology from it. Jesus, at about the age of 12, would have gone into his father's business, learned the trade of a tekton. Now, I use that word because carpenter is just one part of what that means. The other part of what tekton means is a builder. And when I kind of looked at this, I thought how appropriate it was that Jesus, when we read in the gospel story from Luke that he was in the temple, he knew about structures. He knew about buildings. He knew how they were constructed and how they were meant to last and be solid. And of course, the people who attended the temple relied on that it was there, it was permanent, it was forever, it was safe, it was where God dwelt, it was where they learned how to behave in terms of the Decalogue, the Torah, the commandments. And Jesus said, this is going to come crumbling down. I wonder how they would have heard that. And I picture Jesus in this story in the temple precincts. And Luke actually has Jesus often in the temple. Luke has a particular love for the temple, more than the other writers, it would seem. So there's a kind of, this is a good place. And I see in this picture Jesus looking out from the temple towards where the people had been putting their offerings in. You remember the story that precedes this one? The widow's mite. The woman with nothing put in everything. And not one person commented about that except Jesus. She was unseen, and yet she was faithful. And I wonder if that's what Jesus thought about when he talked about the temple crumbling. That would go, but that faithfulness would continue. I love the stories of the Midrash about the Ark of the Covenant, which was kept in the temple. This was the kind of portable church, if you like, that was carried from place to place to remember God's presence with them. And in that ark were the commandments, the Torah, the law. And the Midrash says that when Moses came down the mountain with the tablets of the law and stone, he saw the people below who had constructed a golden calf out of their melted down jewellery and their gold teeth, And here they were dancing and praising this golden calf. One story says Moses was so mad at it that he flung the tablets down and they shattered. Another says when he saw them, he realised that they would be in big trouble with Yahweh, with God. And so he broke deliberately the commandments so they couldn't get into trouble because they yet hadn't got the commandments. The third possibility is that he dropped them so that he too might be one of them, having broken the rules, if you like. Either way, in any of those stories, and I love them all, there's another story that I love even more. What happened to those fragments? They were picked up and placed in the ark along with the new commandments which Moses had received. So as they journey and as they enter the great temple and they are placed in the temple, together there's the brokenness and the wholeness of the people. And that's who we are. We're both broken and whole. This church which we love, the building, And Monday mornings, it's carefully and lovingly looked after by the team. It's not going to last forever. But that word of Jesus to us, that loving and laughing Jesus, and there's pictures that were painted. There are pictures where Jesus, in a Southeast Asian village, is in a fishing boat with the other fishers, or in a Mexican bar having a drink. The incarnational theology that we follow says that Jesus is in our culture, whatever culture it might be, and that's depicted in those paintings. But the underlying word from the loving, laughing Jesus is to love one another. To love one another. Jesus, the tecton, knew how to put dovetail joints together, lintels on doorways, make millstones out of rock. Jesus was the builder of a people who knew how to love. And thank God we belong to that community.